If you like what you're hearing, put your money where your media is by supporting the podcasts you listen to, like this one. You can contribute at www.lauraflanders.org. And thanks. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real models of shifting power from the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, politics, and activism. From banking for profit to banking for people. This week on the show, is a public bank in the financial capital of the world even possible? Deyanira Del Rio from the New Economy Project, Linda Levy of the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, and Enlace's Cindy Martinez join us here in studio to tell us why it's more needed than ever and what they're doing to make it happen. Then we go down to the Public Bank NYC's recent launch action on Wall Street. It's all coming up on the Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome. If the 2008 financial crisis taught us anything, it was that private for-profit financial institutions don't always have their consumers' interests at heart, even as the subsequent bailout revealed just how far some politicians are willing to go to help those self-same investment firms, accountants, and banks. Is there an alternative? Well, in the last decade, New York City paid private money managers more than $2 billion to invest city workers' pensions funds. Private Wall Street companies kept 97% of the money made off those investments, and a whole lot of people think we can do something different. Today's guests are part of a coalition kicking off a campaign for a public bank, owned and operated in the public interest. It would send quite a signal here in the world financial capital of New York. To tell us more, we are joined by Deyanira Del Rio of the New Economy Project, as well as two members of the coalition, Linda Levy from the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union and Cindy Martinez from Enlace. I'm so glad to have you all with us, and I should point out that Linda's been on the show before. We will pick up on that conversation in a minute, but let's start with how things happen now. With respect to banking in New York City, how does it work today? Deyanira.
Sure. So we're talking about public banking, which is really around how the city of New York does its banking. And so right now, New York City has, on any given day, billions of dollars sitting on deposit at different Wall Street banks. It also does lots of other kinds of businesses with the banks, but we'll hold off on that for now. But actually, New York City is legally barred from putting its money anywhere except the big banks. The banks have lobbied pretty consistently over the years to make sure that not a single penny of public dollars can go into credit unions, for example, such as the Community Development Credit Union that Linda represents. And so right now, we literally have billions of dollars that are of public dollars that the city has collected, and that instead of being reinvested back in our local economy, back in local communities, are being siphoned out by these banks and invested outside of New York City and in many ways that Cindy will cover in very destructive kinds of projects. And so what we're pushing for through this coalition, Public Bank NYC, is for a really bold vision for what a city-owned public municipal bank could do if the city peeled off even some of those billions of dollars to put in a bank that it creates for the public good.
Linda, the New York City comptroller, Scott Stringer, made a good point when he looked into all of this, and he said, you know, the Native American people who sold New York, Manhattan, to the colonizers, he said they struck a better deal with the British than the city has struck with these private banks. How so?
Well, I think the private banks are taking our money and they're reinvesting it in places that we have no control over. And people are hardworking in New York City. We're not talking about the money that the very, very rich have. We're talking about pension funds. We're talking about city workers' money. We're talking about your average person. And they worked hard for this money, and the money is disappearing from the city very, very quickly as it gets reinvested in places that the banks find they can make more money.
And let's talk about some of those places. You want to give us some examples of where this money goes?
Yeah, some of this money is going into investments to continue to fund private prisons. For example, these big Wall Street banks provide the money that private prisons like CoreCivic and Geo Group need in order to create private prisons, most of these being immigration detention centers. And these prisons are being used to lock up our community. So it's like Black and brown and low wage income and immigrant communities are being locked up just so that these private prisons could profit from it. And these Wall Street banks are also profiting from it as well.
So how would a public bank work differently? Who wants to come in on that?
Well, our vision in New York City is that a public bank, again, a municipal public bank, could be chartered specifically to reinvest public money, public dollars, back into real economic needs that so many low-income neighborhoods and communities of color in New York City are struggling with, needs that the banks are not meeting. So some of those examples include in kind of cooperative, democratically controlled institutions right now that are really taking root in neighborhoods of color around the city in very exciting ways and creating economic opportunity that the big banks and other sort of big economic actors are not providing. And
We're talking about cooperatives,
exactly,
land trusts,
we're
credit
talking about
unions.
worker cooperatives that are creating safe, well-paying jobs for immigrants and others who are routinely exploited in the private job market. We're talking about financial cooperatives like community development credit unions that are actually mobilizing neighborhood deposits and investing in permanently affordable housing, in local businesses, and much more. We're talking about land trusts, community land trusts now that are really kind of on the rise in New York City, to say the least. There's tremendous momentum now. There's more than a dozen of these models that are being formed in different neighborhoods throughout the city. And what they're doing is actually pretty radical in a sense, although from a different point of view, it's common sense. They're taking land out of the private market, saying this is not something that should be bought and sold to the highest bidder. Land belongs to everyone, and there should be a way to manage land that is in the public interest. And so through a land trust, they're able to do that. Exactly, and through that, they're able to preserve commercial space for local businesses that are being displaced. They're able to create and lower the cost of housing and many more communities.
So why not, Linda, just use a community development credit union like yours? Why do we need a public bank?
Well, the credit union has its limitations. For example, we are very, very proud of the fact that in the 30-plus years that we've been around, we've loaned out more than $100 million to our members. Mm-hmm. And in that, we have been reinvesting in our community. But that's a lot. We are 87% loaned out. We don't have any more capital to lend. We don't have any more capital to invest in our community.
So, but why not just change the law? I mean, we talked about it last time that we were on the show, and it seemed like a no-brainer. Why should the city not be allowed to invest its funds in the credit union?
I guess you should ask Chase and Citi and find out why they think that this law can't be changed. It has every single year since I've been on your show last, it has been put to the state legislature to change that law, and it never, ever succeeds.
So
go ahead. Just one point on that, though. So even if we were successful, right, then you could have the city say, we'll place a deposit at Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union. The credit union has $54 million of assets. The city has, on some days, $8 to $10 billion of assets, right? And so there aren't right now credit unions, and certainly not community development credit unions, that can take on the scale of deposits that New York City requires. Also, other business lines that are provided by banks, some are beyond the scope of what a credit union could provide. So while we certainly think that law should change because it would be of benefit to the credit unions and the work that community development credit unions are doing on the ground, it's not going to solve the problem of where does the city move its money when it wants to divest from Wells Fargo and Chase.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guests are Dianera Del Rio of the New Economy Project, Linda Levy of the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, and Enlace's Cindy Martinez. They're part of a campaign banking on public banking. A bank that puts the people ahead of profits, they bet, would give average New Yorkers a financial institution they could trust. Plus, there's no reason that private shareholders should get to be the ones profiting off public dollars. Is there? More to come.
Oh, come you masters of greed, you who invent derivatives, and you who sell us bad loans, who give and receive huge bonuses. Oh, come you masters of profit, who love an unrestricted market, who would deregulate our very souls, who care for nothing but your narrow goals. I am a game cutter, yeah. Greed cutter.
Masters of Greed by Rebel Tombau, released on Spiritual Life Music. Here on the Laura Flanders Show, we're dedicated to journalism in the interest of the public good, but we can't do it without good members of the public, like you. Become a sustaining member today or make a one-time donation. Go to lauraflanders.org, where you can watch this week's show and subscribe to this podcast to receive my weekly commentaries, additional web exclusives, and more. Later on, we'll take you to the Public Bank NYC's recent launch rally on Wall Street. But first, back to my guests, Deyanira Del Rio of the New Economy Project, Linda Levy of the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, and Enlace's Cindy Martinez. They're part of a growing campaign to create New York's first publicly owned and operated bank. There's something the matter in public banking matters, they say, when billions of public dollars invested in private banks end up underwriting the same industries and corporations that incarcerate and evict people for private profit. A public bank, they believe, would plow public dollars back, not siphon them out of New York's most needy communities.
So this is fairly complex territory that we're getting into, and we'll get into more of it in a minute. But how are you organizing your campaign? Who's part of it, Cindy? Why are you part of it? When community organizations have a lot of very immediate things to deal with, why get involved in a campaign around public banking?
Yeah, I think the reason why we're involved is for a lot of many reasons. Like I said, we've been leading especially the campaign around prison divestment since 2010. We've been asking institutions, cities, and something that like Linda had said, it's our community's money that's being invested into like these harmful institutions are then being placed into our community, right? So like for us, the goal has always been to stop the lobbying power of like these banks and these corporations that inflict harm on our community. And when you look at it, it's all connected. It's all very intersectional. Let's look at our community members that make up who we are, like Enlace is alliance of like worker centers and base building organization. It's our community's needs. Through one of our most current work, we demand that resources be given our community in order for us to thrive. And through the public bank, we believe this could happen. Like we call for divestment, but we also call for reinvestment. And the reinvestment comes into the resources that our community needs.
So who has public banks as of now? Where do you look for models?
So the interesting thing is that there aren't many models in this country. There's certainly more cities that are looking at public banking, and largely the growing movement for divestment is creating a new urgency for public banking, right? I mean, we've heard from cities all over the country that say they want to divest from certain banks because of their investments in pipelines and fossil fuels, in private prisons. Progressive city councils don't want public money to be supporting the caging of human beings and our ecological destruction. But when cities look to do this, they have a really hard time finding where can they place the money. If you put it from one Wall Street bank to another Wall Street bank, you're going to basically find that your money's financing pretty much the same kinds of.
So what about states? Didn't Phil Murphy in New Jersey just run on a platform of a public bank?
Yes, and I think he's a former Goldman Sachs person. Yeah, the public bank bandwagon is pretty interesting, and there are differences. I should say this. Not every public bank campaign has the same vision. So just to put that out there, but there is one state bank of North Dakota that exists and has existed for about 100 years. But it was created in a different context. It's a very different kind of landscape, to say the least, than in New York City. And so while that has been a model that can make the case and has proven to be very successful in certain ways, we don't want to romanticize any one model.
Yeah.
That bank invested in the Dakota Access Pipeline, for example. And so, we really want to make sure, and this goes to your question about approach, we want to make sure that the vision for a public bank isn't just a publicly owned bank for its own sake that then does the same kinds of investments that Wall Street banks are doing. We want to have a really strong progressive vision so that this bank can be a force for a different kind of financial
gets
system.
To the question of what do we mean by public. I mean, I can see that you all have an idea of public that has to do with lots of organizations and a coalition of groups with a community agenda. Andrew Cuomo, the governor, may have a different idea of public. He might think of a public bank as being something that he's in charge of. What about that concern that something that was publicly owned by publicly elected officials could just be a vehicle for corruption and yet more influenced by politicians? Mm-hmm. Linda?
It's definitely a concern. I mean, one of the things that our coalition is still working on is coming up with a model structure of governance for the bank. And in a way that will maintain public control that is really of the people, the grassroots. It's one of the reasons when you were asking like who's a part of it and why, it's because we feel that we need to have control over this. It's something that every grassroots community group in the city, every membership, democratically elected membership organization in the city recognizes the failure that our public leadership has resulted. And the idea is to come up with a structure that will maintain control by the people who are working on getting this started and who will always be in tune with what's needed in the community.
The people, the institutions, do you have some sense of what that structure might be?
In terms of the coalition structure? Yeah, so we're building a pretty broad coalition, and that's an approach that I don't think other places have taken. And it's really important to us for accountability purposes, right? Who gets to say what this public bank looks like? Also to build a base of support. We have no illusions that this is going to be an easy battle. We know what is ahead. Here in New York, the banking lobby pretty much comes out, with swinging, let's say, on for even very basic kind of demands that they are more transparent in disclosing the kinds of investments they make. So, we know what we're up against, and we think building a broad coalition very deliberately is going to be really key to our success. So we have labor groups, we have community organizations, we have divestment-focused organizations, we have community development lenders like Linda's Credit Union, and also the growing landscape of cooperatives in the city that are really excited about this idea that there could be a public institution that supports them, right? So right now we have worker co-ops growing around the city. The city of New York itself has invested in them. We have strong community development credit unions like the Lower East Side. But they're operating in this as kind of oases in this broader system of capitalism and exploitation. And so the idea that there could be a public bank putting public dollars safely, right, into these institutions, investing in proven successful models is something that's really exciting.
And what about the public appetite for all this? Cindy, we saw after Occupy Wall Street, that Move Your Money campaign gained kind of a lot of steam. What do you think is the public's attitude to all this?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, like it's needed. I think the public knows that it's needed. I feel like in a lot of the work that we have done, like what the community is saying, these are like directly affected folks. These are workers like street vendors, and these are workers, warehouse workers, right? They're all asking for this. They're all asking for like a resource. They're all asking to build a city that represents them, but also meets their needs. For a long time, New York City has said to be like a welcoming and a sanctuary, but when you look at it and you follow the money, the reality is that it's not.
And do people get it? I mean, do people get it that they are, whether they like it or not, actually invested themselves, their future, the way that their pensions perform or don't perform in the market makes them invested in things like private prisons and private security and all the things that you've mentioned? Do we get that deeply? And how will you help people understand this better? I mean, when you're talking to your friends and neighbors, how do you approach telling the story?
I think a lot of it has to do like just like kind of like educational materials, like understanding the flow of money, understanding the lobbying sectors, just understanding it all, and having these conversations and every day, like the work that we're doing, understanding even like what the public bank is. Like I know recently we just had like a get together with a lot of our members, and a presentation around the public bank was done, and it's not so much about like what we know it can do, but it's what is it that the public needs it to do.
And it is true that a lot of people, when they tried to move their money, found, as you said, many of the cities have found, like Seattle and Oakland and others, that there really wasn't a good place to move it to.
Yeah.
But is that conversation still alive, do you feel?
Well, I think that there is definitely still a move your money conversation to be had. It is problematic when you're talking about large institutions like a city or a university, because the most attractive places to move your money to would be to community development credit unions and other community development financial institutions. And as Day was describing, we can't really accept huge deposits like that. So where to put the money? There is nowhere.
And this is a very critical point and a critical moment in the sense that a lot of money is about to be divested from fossil fuels, for example, let alone private prisons. But we had the city people involved in that divestment campaign on the show recently. They're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars needing a new home.
And New York City right now has over 24 banks that it designates as depositories. So that is where the city is allowed to put its money. And this is, around the country, it's a lot of the same banks that hold these deposits. There's $1 billion almost alone in just Chase from New York City deposits. So it's, last year, the city of New York also announced that it was going to essentially divest some of its business from Wells Fargo in light of, the millions of fraudulent accounts and other things. And also because Wells Fargo did something that is really hard for banks to do, which is it got a really low rating on its community reinvestment exam. And so that was kind of like a legal hook on which the city could say, we're not going to renew certain contracts with Wells Fargo. Well, where is it going to move its money? And so it's creating real urgency. And to your earlier question about do people understand this? This is a major goal of our campaign, is public education around municipal finance and what happens, how much money is New York City paying to Wall Street for the privilege of holding and managing its deposits? What else could that look like?
And how do you feel about being invested in these institutions, whether you like it or not? So quickly, what can people actually do right here, right now that we've got them all jazzed about a public bank? Who wants to take that, Deanna?
Well, we have, so people can go to publicbanknyc.org to learn more about the campaign and how to get involved. We're continuing to build out the coalition. If an organization, if viewers are part of an organization that would like to get involved here in New York City, they can reach out. Again, space building, community groups, many others around the city. And individuals can also sign on for more information and to be informed of upcoming action.
We got our cameras to the launch of this campaign. Do you want to describe what happened June 5th?
Sure. So on June 5th, our coalition, Public Bank NYC, went down to pay a visit to Wall Street, and we were in front of the New York Stock Exchange, holding basically a teach-in, a kind of a rally, debuting our campaign and really describing why we need a public bank for New York City and what kinds of investments a public bank could make that could advance racial and economic justice and economic opportunity for New Yorkers, rather than, continue status quo of New York City placing our public money in banks that are not serving our neighborhoods, not serving our local economy, and actually investing in things that most New Yorkers and certainly our elected leaders claim that they do not want to be supporting.
We had our cameras there. Take a look.
Public banks! Public banks! Public banks! Public banks! We are unstoppable! A people's bank is possible! We are unstoppable! A people's bank is possible! We are unstoppable!
So there are a myriad of problems that people are facing in New York City. Everything from the housing crisis to mountains of debt for students and others, to the environmental justice catastrophes. And all of this, at least from the public bank perspective, from our coalition's perspective, is really rooted in the way the financial system props up all of these exploitative and extractive practices. So the way we see the public bank moving forward is providing a way for the city's public money to be accountable to people in New York. So what that will do is it not only will divert and divest money from these banks that are financing horrible things like the Dakota Access Pipeline. So we see the public bank as a mechanism to reroute the city's incredible wealth and resources to the people that need it the most.
I want to talk a little bit about one of the most disgusting industries. We have the power.
Because of the cost of living and school supplies, I have felt the need and have taken on 3 jobs while studying at Pratt. And this has not only had an effect on my success at school, but also on my health. I want to put in all of my time to study, but that just isn't possible for me and many others. A public bank in New York City will help students, as it will help all New Yorkers.
Wall Street banks look at students as a way to make money through student loans. And students are drowning in debt. There's, thousands of people that default every single day on their loans, and this stops them from being able to really start their lives when they graduate. $1.4 trillion in student loan debt in the nation. And that's all to, line the pockets of Wall Street banks, and we're saying enough is enough.
I am a standing member of NYCC, New York Community for Change, and I'm a member of the Flatbush chapter. The big banks hold all the money. They don't spend it in the community. The housing market that was crashed was the direct result of Wall Street. And they didn't help people to stay in their homes. They force people out or they push people out. Poor people like myself, working 5-6 days a week, paying over $2,000 for a 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. We could get a loan from that bank to start a small business for ourselves or to buy our own home so our family can be secure. So that is, I think that is the main objective of having this bank that is for the people, by the people, to help the people.
1, we are the people. 2, we want divestment. 3, we know that we have them.
My name is Marisol Linda Diaz, and I am from Brooklyn Stone and Tile. That revolves around the employee cooperative. All the employees have a voice. We do this collectively together. People like myself, minorities, immigrants, that could only dare to dream to have our own business, and now it's a reality. It's not known that there is a door open for financing. Having a public bank and having the awareness that goes along with that can open up that avenue to say, hey, I would like to start up my own business, instead of outsourcing it somewhere else or even globally, keeping it here. The public bank is what will be able to provide that avenue for people like us. They can utilize those funds to do the same thing in the capacity that we did.
You were just listening to voices from the recent Public Bank New York City launch action on Wall Street, including Julianne Robinson of the New Economy Project, Gigi Neeson and Megan Ahern from the New York Public Interest Research Group, and Winsome Pendergrass from New York Communities for Change. For information on all my guests and more of our coverage on forward-thinking economic models, including our recent episode, Communities Over Commodities, about housing, go to our website, lauraflanders.org, where you can download this podcast, watch the show, and access all our archives. Next time, we head across the Atlantic to Preston, a small city in the UK that's suffering from the consequences of deindustrialization. They've established a new model, partly inspired by Cleveland, and it's shifting power back to people. Now the National Labour Party is interested. That's next time on The Laura Flanders Show. Thanks for listening. This show is produced by yours truly and Tammy Warnoff, Monica Mohapatra, Danica D'Souza, Charlotte Carpenter, Jeannie Hopper, Mira Al-Rahim, and Dominic Marcella. The program's made possible by the Novo Foundation, the Fonda Foundation, Cloud Mountain, and the Rising Fund, as well as by listeners like you. We can only do this together. Stay kind, stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura Flanders.